All right, so we are looking at the formative assessment for Chapter 6. So as I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I'm doing all the parts. Tomorrow you're allowed to use a calculator, but you have to show like your work, and then you're not going to be given the rubrics, so you need to know the rubrics and what you need to do on these tests. So the first thing I'm going to do is I know this is the problem solving standard, so I know I need to put in the important info. Next, to save time, I'm not going to read through the question. I'm going to show you what I did. I've read through the question several times. As I'm taking a test, I want to read through the questions several times. I want to be looking for when they ask for multiple questions. All right? There's a 1 here, and there's 1A and 1B. Anything that is like that is all connected to that first problem. And then there's a 2 down here. So with Casey, I'm going to put the important information for Casey, and then I'm going to have a separate problem for Jared. All right? So for Casey, what's important is that she has a 35% discount. And then what's important before we get started is that the original price was $42. As I'm going through this, if I make a mistake, just raise your hand so I can figure out what it is. I appreciate that. Then for Part B, the state sales tax is 8%. And so I did all the important information. I did all the important information for Part A all in one step. That was worrisome. I wonder if that's going to show up on the recording that I ran out of battery almost. All right. Now, how much is Casey's discount? So we're going to answer that first. What will her new total be with her employee discount? That's going to be the second part. They want me to show all my work even though I can use a calculator. So I want to set both of these problems up as, what is her discount? Well, her discount is 35%. I know she's going to be paying 100%. I know that the original price was $42. I know that I need to figure out what her discount is. I could put this as the part or the discount. Then, when I'm figuring out a part of a whole, I know that I use Hank's method. Hank's method says that I take my percent, 35%, and I turn it into a decimal. Then I take my decimal and I times it by the whole thing. Then that should give me that percent, or 35% of $42. And I know that that is $14.70. And so I'm using this to solve it. I'm going to use the ratios up here because the numbers are a little funny. And I'm going to use this to check it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to find out what I can do to 100 to get to 42. Now I'm going to be sneaky here, and I know I can take 100 times 0.42. Whoa. I can take 100 times 0.42 to get to 42. I could have also divided it by something. As long as it works to get from the one to the other, you're fine. So I'm going to take the same thing. I'm going to take 35% and times it by 0.42. And I should get 14.7. And so this is my check that I have the correct answer. Okay? Then I need to write my answer in a complete sentence, so I'm going to do so. Casey's discount is $14.70. In the same part, I'm going to say I did not round my answers because you can have fractional parts of money. All right? And because Mr. Molnar is not the brightest crayon in the box, I'm going to kind of put a box around my main answer. I'm going to make my main answer kind of clear. That's just a nice thing to do. I appreciate it. All right? Then, that should be enough for the first part. I'm going to go to the second part here. What will her new total be with her employee discount? So, her employee discount, I'm thinking of two ways to solve this. If her discount was 35%, that means the whole thing was 100%. That means she would have paid 65% of the total cost. What? If she got 35% off of it, that means 65% is what she would have had to have paid. So then I can figure out 65% of the whole thing, and that's 65% of $42. And so this is going to be the discounted total. Once again, I'm finding a percent of a whole. So I would use Hank's method. So I would take 0.65, turn the percent into a decimal, multiply it by the whole, and then that should equal my answer, which would be $27.30. I could do the same thing here to get from 100 to 42. I know I can times it by 0.42. I could take 65 times 0.42. And that would equal $27.3. And so that could be a check. What most of you probably did is the third thing I'm going to say, which is $42 was the original price. We found the discount. The discount was going to be $14.70. And so if I take the original price and I subtract the discount, I'm going to equal the discounted price. And I could subtract it, but I know it's going to be $27.30 unless I made a horrible mistake. Last two things I do. Casey's discounted total is $27.30. Writing the answer in a complete sentence. Then I would write down, I did not round. Because you can have parts of a dollar. Okay. So, I believe I've done everything for the first part, for part A. Now I go to part B. Tax in Casey's state is 8%. How much tax would Casey pay on her discounted total? Show all work. So from the last problem, we know that the discounted total was $27.30. We know that we need to figure out what the tax is, or what the part is. We know, according to this, that tax in her state is 8%. It's right around 5.6 around here, give or take. And then we know that her discounted total is 100% of what she would have to pay. I can do the same kind of thing as what I've done before, so I could go from 100 to 27.30, which would be the same as multiplying 100 by 0.2730. I could multiply the top by that. There's a way I could divide it. It's like dividing it by 3.8 or something like that. As long as I do the same thing to the numerator and the denominator, I can find the missing part. All right? But I'm going to use that as my check. I'll type it into my calculator after I'm done. I'm finding a percent of a whole. So I would take the percent, I would write it as a decimal. 8% is 0.08. I would multiply it by the whole thing of the whole. So times 27.30. Any way that I'm going to do it, I should get I should get 2.184. If I do the same thing up here, I would get 2.184. All right? Now I need to write my answer in a complete sentence. So the tax would be 8% of that. It is 8%, sorry. The tax would be $2.18. Now, in money, oftentimes they round up. We're just going to follow the normal rules of rounding. So the next digit was a 4, so I would round this down to $2.18. Put a box around the answer so Mr. Molnar can see that. And then I would write down, I rounded to the nearest penny or hundredth because you can't have parts of a penny. I can't take a penny and a ginormous scissors and cut that up. Well, it wouldn't be. It's not legal tender, then it doesn't count. All right. So I believe I've done everything for part B. I go on to number 2. I have to start with my important info. The important info here is Jared paid 40%. The video game was $28.99. You might want to add the parents paid the rest. Rents paid the rest. All right. Now, same kind of problem here. I know that the whole game is 100%. I know that the whole game is $28.99. I know that Jared paid 40%. I need to figure out how much he paid. So the part that he paid. I could scale this down to go from here to here. I could times it by 0.2899. You noticing a pattern with how I'm doing that from 100 to this? Then from 40, I could also times it by 0.2899. I'm going to use this as my check because I'm getting a percent of a whole. So I turn my percent into a decimal, Hank's method. 0.4 or 0.40 are equal. I times it by $28.99. And I'm going to get the part Notice that I don't round it right away. I wait until I get to my answer. If I was to do the same thing up here, I know I would get 11.596. If I was taking a test, I would do it. I've just done this a couple times, so I know that that is correct. I write it down. Jared paid $11.60. Notice the question, how much did Jared pay and how much did his parents pay for the video game? Multi-part questions you want to read carefully. So parents, I could do the same thing. Paid. The whole game was $28.99. If Jared paid 40%, his parents would have to pay 60%. I could go and find the equivalent ratios. I could divide this, or I could multiply this by 0.2899. I could multiply this by 0.2899 to find out what that is. That's going to be my check, though. Finding a part or percent of a whole, I take the percent, turn it into a decimal, multiply it by the whole. That's going to give me my answer. $17.394. So Jared's parents paid $17.39. And then I would do that with my check, making sure it was 17.394. I would need to write down for both of these somewhere along the line of all values were rounded to the nearest penny because you can't have parts of a penny. Before I finish this, there's another way I could have done this. There's another way that you probably did do this. You'd take the $28 and the 99 cents and you would subtract from it what Jared paid. So if he paid $11.60, you could subtract it to get the $17.39 that his parents paid. And so if you're really taking a test and not just showing the class answers, you want to think of other ways to check your work, especially if it helps you get the right answer. Okay? Before I finish this question, I turn to my rubric. I think about these things because I don't have this in front of me for tomorrow, so this is something I want to look at closely tonight. Did I identify the important information? Yes. Did I come up with appropriate problem-solving strategy? Yes. Did I set up a ratio, equivalent ratio, like we were learning in the last chapter? Yes. Did I get a complete and accurate solution? Yes. Did I answer in a complete sentence? Yes. Did I explain my solution when rounding? Yes. This is an important area to do for these questions. Did I do things to check that my solution was correct? Yes. And these things you have to know that you're doing them as you're taking the test.